Welcome to Childcare Conversations, the podcast where early childhood leaders like you get real-world strategies, honest talk, and a whole lot of support. Whether you're running one center or many, we're here to help you lead with confidence and clarity. This episode is brought to you by our summer partner, Childcare Business Growth, your go-to solution for filling spots, increasing revenue, and scaling your childcare business without the burnout. We're proud to partner with a team that's as committed to your success as we are. Learn more at childcarebusinessgrowth.com. Now, let's get into today's conversation, one we think you're really going to love.
It's nap time, and you've got children in your classroom who just want their insert blanket toy. And today, Carrie and Diane are going to talk about that from a developmental standpoint, from a director's standpoint.
Let's see where we go with it. We don't know exactly.
That's a great point. I was that kid that had one of those until I was 7 and I lost it somewhere, or somebody lost it for me. I'm not sure which. 3 of my 4 children had Loveys. They were very, very attached to the point where, we stockpiled them. So, who wants to start? Diane, Carrie, where are we going to go with this today?
I mean, first, let's give a definition. So I think lovey is kind of a vague term. So instead, I want to use the term security object or security item, because for some kids, it's not a blanket, it's not a burp cloth, it's not a stuffed animal. For some kids, it is a Hot Wheel. Or it is their parents' handbag or wallet or something like that. Like, the security object doesn't have to be what we have in our head when we hear the word lovey. And that's one of the problems that I've seen at some schools, because if a kid's security object is a screwdriver, we have some safety concerns, right? So we can't let them walk around with a wrench or a screwdriver in the classroom. But if that is the thing that the child uses to self-calm, if we don't let them have something to self-calm, how are they going to de-escalate? How are they going to re-regulate?
Exactly. And I love that you put that question out there, because I would love to take off with that. But let me just add to the names for these items. So they are also sometimes called attachment items. Yep. Or comfort items. And Corinne, my adult neurodiverse daughter, who still has one of those, whatever you want to call it. As a matter of fact, I'll grab one that she calls an eepworm, that literally is still, as an adult, her comfort item, but she has another name for it that she hopes sounds a little more mature and grown up, which is an emotional regulation tool. Like an emotional support animal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is an emotional support tool.
I think that phrase actually makes the most sense, because that's what it is. That is its function, whether we call it a security object, an attachment object, whatever. Mm-hmm. It is an emotional support tool.
Well, and what's interesting is we are not the only animals that have these. I mean, otters have their rock, right? So, yep. And there are other animals who will take things for comfort. And so I love the fact that we're looking for a more appropriate term. We've got fidget toys, right? But again, those fidget toys play some of that same role, especially regardless of your label.
Mm-hmm. Right. And one other name, I'm sorry, Carrie.
I was just going to say, elephants do the same thing. Elephants have specific trees that they go back to when they are agitated, that they will rub up against.
You guys know a lot more about the animal kingdom than I do, so this is fascinating. Another name, though, is transitional item, which kind of emphasizes the idea that for some children, it is a transitional item that brings them comfort when their main source of comfort, i.e. their attachment person, mom or whoever that may be, is not available. And so, but I think the most important part of all of these names to keep in mind is one that we used for one of them, for the emotional support tool. These are tools for children. These are ways that they gain or regain their composure and their self-regulation. And it's not something that we reward them with when they do what they're supposed to do. They use those tools to be able to do those things. And I think if we use that as our basic mindset of children, many children do need some assistance beyond what the teacher of 12 or 18 or 28 children can provide in the classroom. And so it's a very valuable tool.
Can
And
I
oh, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, more and more adults have these too, and we're using them all the time, but we don't associate them that way. I mean, think about how many people pick up a phone to doom scroll or to play a game, to disconnect, to get their mind out of whatever they might have been spinning or circling with. Growing up, it was the child who carried that book maybe all the time, that was always a reader. Their own version, their own tool. I love the fact that you've called it a tool. I don't know why I hadn't heard that before, but now I have a new phrase.
I think back, that one where I was going to go, but when we're talking about it being a tool and that adults have them too, I think, and we say nowadays, but I don't know about you, but one of my grandmothers, when she was feeling stressed, would go out and garden. And my mom, for decades, would go smoke a cigarette. So I don't think it's a nowadays thing. I mean, Sherlock Holmes had his little pipe that he would stick in his mouth and chew. You never saw him smoking it in any of those movies. He would just stick it in his mouth, and it was his comfort item. Again, I don't think that was in the books. I think that was just in the movies. But I think we have evidence all through history that this is a developmental need for humans, no matter what age they are. It is an emotional support need. You need to have physical items that connect you to a feeling of safety and security. I'm sure in, medieval times, there were people who had emotional security swords.
Well, I'm thinking about even like, so, if you are, I'm just going to say it, recovering, chances are you've got a coin in your pocket, right? Which again helps you connect to something. So there's all kinds of examples, not just in childcare. So, but let's bring us back there. Now that everybody's learned a little bit about the animal kingdom and history and maybe just adult humans, I'm going to try to rein us back in and talk specifically about this role with children. So those who are listening have the background knowledge that they can help their staff and the parents in their program understand why these are something we should not discourage. And I loved Diane's comment about using as a reward, right? So both of those are no-nos, right? So in case you missed that, I think it's clear to really understand that we shouldn't be using this as the
it shouldn't be, if you can stop crying, I will give you your bunny.
Right.
No. I will give you your bunny to help you stop crying.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to pull in something that you were saying, Carrie, about this being a basic human developmental need. And it turns out the animal kingdom also has this need. And Kate, you used the word, it's a need for connection. This support, emotional support tool or lovey or whatever you choose to call it, is filling a critical need. When children are in your programs and they're in your teachers' classrooms and they are looking around at the, sometimes very noisy, very active place, lots of things visually going on and smells and everything else, they are looking their brains and their bodies. So developmentally, this is an unconscious thing, but their brains and bodies are constantly scanning the environment and they want to know two things. Am I safe?
Yep.
In other words, are these people threats? Is this threatening? Is that threatening? Okay, that's one part of it. But the other part of it is, am I loved? Do I belong? Does somebody care about me here? And you know, I don't want it to put too much onto this little inanimate object, but for some people, this is the stand-in for, oh, I feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
I feel cared for in this space. Because your teachers, no matter how fabulous and seasoned and wise they are, they only have two arms if they, or have a full body, so they can't be everywhere giving hugs and all of those physical comforts to every child whenever every child needs it. But that is part of that, do I belong here?
Yeah,
And so thanks for starting us off, Kate, with what is actually, brain research tells us, the most important thing that will bring about resilience in young children is that they had a strong relationship with at least one caring adult. And there were some studies that, well, one in particular, that looked at children who had loveys and children who did not. And
Oh,
again, we're going to use these terms interchangeably.
okay.
Doesn't
So
mean.
let's come back
Oh,
to
okay,
that,
sorry.
Diane, because I definitely
Okay.
want to make sure that in our show notes we have that study. So somebody
Oh,
want to
this
write
is
down a note?
true. This is true.
Somebody want to
Yeah.
make me a note that we remember to come back.
I wrote it down.
Thank you.
But
all right, Carrie.
I was just going to say, and then we'll go back and have you finish your thought, Diane. I didn't know it from a research standpoint, but when I was a new teacher, I was like 19 or 20 years old, and I had a toddler classroom. The teacher who I took over for had the lovey, the connection items kept in the kids' cubbies, and in a toddler classroom, the kids do not have access to their cubbies because they will be in and out of it all day. And I changed it to, there were baskets underneath. We had a changing table, which was basically a counter. So there was a space underneath where kids like to go when they wanted to feel that sense of enclosure. And I put all of them, except for pacifiers, which, but all the other ones under there in a couple of different baskets so that the kids could go get them whenever they wanted them. And I had a co-teacher and she's like, why are you doing that? I was like, because this way, when they need it, they can get it and I don't have to. It's making my job easier. And then she went, oh, that's true. And she was like, well, what if somebody gets somebody else's levy? I'm like, I'm pretty sure the toddlers will self-police that. I'm not super worried about that. Karma is very quick in a toddler classroom. So at 19 or 20, I was like, this is what will make my job easier and make it better for the kids. So let's talk about what the research shows that backs up my brain. I like it when research backs up what was in my brain.
And I'm going to hit the timeout button for just a minute. The study that I was about to cite, I actually cited secondhand, which I don't normally do, because so I don't want to depend on that in case I can't find the original site. So let's rewind that. Just what was I saying before I went off on that tangent? Because it really wasn't, that part wasn't important. Now the thing that I said about research showing the connection being important, that is from the Center on the Developing Child, and other people have figured that out as well. But anyway, can we just like chop that mid sentence out or whatever?
We'll see. We'll talk to the editor.
But
We
could just tell people, ignore that part. There we go. There, I edited.
I mean, part of what makes, I think, our podcast different is that it is just a conversation. And sometimes we're like, I don't know, somebody told me this. And then we have to go try to figure out who it was who told us that or where we read it. If I could remember all the things that I had read, I would just be a walking encyclopedia because I read a lot. But like I said, I don't always know where I got that information.
Mm-hmm.
It would be handy if we had AI with us our whole lives, and it could just be annotating where we got stuff. And then you could go into the AI and go, hey, where did this come from? And it would go find it in your transcript of your life. That's what I need.
That only works if I could remember what the subject was I was looking for, because then I still have to have a search term. Other than, that day, I mean, I guess I'd have to catalog everything by like, it was cold and the person was wearing a blue shirt and I think we were here.
Right, right. Yeah.
I mean,
all right.
Let's just we talked about these two things that are happening in the child's brain and body. In other words, the central nervous system, that's the connection between the brain and the body. And they are looking to be safe and to feel loved. Okay? And the from our names of these objects, then we are addressing both of them. We called it a security item, helps the child feel safe. We called it a comfort item, and we talked about how it helps connect the child, or a transition item connects the child to the person that they are most missing, or the person whose leg they run to and grab when something frightens them or scares them or whatever. And so we all actually, did you know this? We all have toddler brains in us at some point, because our brains don't always process the word no, which is why we always try to help teachers tell children what you want them to do, not don't do. Because if you say don't touch the lamp, their brain hears lamp, and that's why they go and touch the lamp, just to see what you'll do. Your brain is actually, as you grow up, does the same thing. A toddler, when they get distressed and they had been safely exploring the environment, and a loud noise happens or something, and they run to their person. Well, don't we all do that? We all, hopefully in our lives, we have some attachment person that we run to when times are hard, and we want that person, even if we have to connect over the phone or online or something. And so, again, back to the idea that we are addressing children's basic developmental needs. And so if they bring these items with them to school, yes, it can open a can of worms, and germy kinds of issues that might make you uncomfortable, but that is a valuable part of what children need, and it's our job to provide children with what they need to grow and develop.
So
the children are a germy thing that we bring into the classroom. And if we want to keep the classroom germ-free, we can't allow the children in. I think the children are more of an issue than the blanket that only gets washed once every other week. I really think that the children are a bigger issue.
Because they don't get washed sometimes except once a week. Okay, so let's think about, we've got directors listening to this episode. So maybe they're on board with us from a research standpoint, but now they're trying to figure out how to implement this, especially if they had been a program with a different type of policy. And so now they have to educate the staff, they have to educate the parents. What might be a great first place? So if you've listened to this episode and you're like, okay, I really see some validity for that, but we've always been a no toys from home program.
Well, I think one of the reasons that people have the no toys from home policy is because things get lost or damaged when they're at school, or could get lost or damaged. And then you've got really mad parents because they sent their iPad Pro 87 or whatever with the kid, and they said that was the child's attachment item. And now they're mad that this $1,000 piece of equipment has been lost. So I think there have to be some parameters, because if their attachment item is a Ferrari, they can't bring it into the school, right? So there have to be some parameters on what kinds of attachment items or emotional support tools the kids can bring in. Can they bring in an iPad? Can they bring in a car? Can they bring in their brother? Like, what kinds of things can they and can they not? I think that's part of it, because you hear, a lot of people hear bring in a thing from home and they go, alert, alert, alert. This is potential exposure. This is potential exposure. And we're going to have mad parents, and we're going to have to pay to buy somebody a new Egwina, which, by the way, it was my sister's transitional item, was a stuffed toy that Fisher-Price made for one season. And boy, when Egwina got lost, it was a nightmare. Because Fisher Price didn't keep making that thing. It was kids are mean sometimes with what they attach to.
Well,
So
it's like anything else that's in your classroom, in your program, that you're making sure that it is something that is safe, that is a reasonable, like a lot of times programs will limit when the child is not using the comfort item, then a reasonable place for it to live is in the child's cubby. And so it needs to be something that is a reasonable size that fits into the cubby, and also those safety issues like, no sharp points, no screwdrivers, as Carrie was joking about, and things like that. Um, but beyond that, I think backing up a little bit, when you start out your program, like, whenever your kids transition to a new room or whatever, and it's a good time to remind your parents of why you do what you do, and you can just kind of let them know that, we understand that children, they determine what their comfort item is. You don't get to pick it. And so sometimes they come up with these strange things, but very often it is because it is a tangible reminder of that attachment person to that child. So just kind of remembering that you are truly supposed to be in a partnership with the families and to work with them. And if they want to bring in a certain something, and you just don't see it happening, that's where you can do that power sharing opportunity of, let's talk about this and see how we can make this work.
Well, and as a parent who had, well, 4 kids, but 3 of them with different items, one of the things that we worked really hard after the first child, who was so attached to one specific item, we eventually were able to get them where they would be okay with something very similar. So, one of my kids was very attached to anything that was a pink bunny. And so it didn't have to be, we got to the point where it didn't have to be the same pink bunny. And so it meant that we could have them at the other parent's house. There could be one at school. There was one, we always had an emergency one in a car, so there were always multiples versus the kids that have to have, this particular dinosaur, this size, this color, this version of the fur worn off, The Velveteen Rabbit is a great book, and it's near and dear to my heart because my oldest son has that brown bunny that's looked a little too loved. And so we've all got that situation, but I think that that's a great opportunity for that conversation with parents, and helping the parents understand why the kid's looking for that, and is it possible to create more than one.
Yeah, I was a blankie kid, and it was there was a specific blanket, and when it got lost, it was a huge problem for me. But I was old enough when it got lost to be like, okay, what was it that I really liked? It was the rubbing it between my fingers. So I just ran around the house looking for anything with that feel, and I discovered, aha, this is something called satin. And for me, it was the satin feel. For other kids, it's that cotton feel or the plush feel, but it never would have occurred to my parents back in the olden days of the 1900s that if I had lost my blanket at school, that they would call the director at home and demand that they open the school back up so that we can find my blankie. So I think that is something that is different today, is that is a reasonable concern for a director to have, is if people bring their Loveys and misplace them, that it's going to become a problem for the director or for the owner. But I still think it's worth it. I think that's a small price to pay for kids being able to self-soothe.
Well, that's why I said, at least when the kids get old enough. I mean, it doesn't really work when they're, under 2. But as they get to 2, I think it's worth having conversations with the parents and the kids about, hey, let's create a whole bunch of these little pink bunnies, right? Let's find, what's your pink bunny that you want to take to school? What's the pink bunny that you want to keep in the car? What is the, so that they have it can still be their insert tool's name. But it doesn't have to be the same one. At least, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how easy of a conversation that is to have. I mean, we did it, but we did it because of the anxiety between the two different parent households and having it to go from each household and to school. Like I was not cut out for that. So I'm like, this one's pink. How about this one? It's tiny, he pink, you know? So, I think we got to the point where we had like 6 at one point in time. So like when we lost one, it was okay. You know, we knew where there was a backup or another one that would do for that child what they really, really needed. And they were 2, but I mean, they were 2. They weren't 4 to 7, which I would think could be. But you know, the child that's just above them, they were 4 before they were okay with not that specific, but, you know.
What I'd like to bring in here is just that respect for children as individuals. Being the parent of a neuro diverse or divergent, I guess, individual, and just kind of seeing the struggles that she had and how some things were not similar to her peers. Does not mean that they are wrong for that particular child. And so if you think that one particular child is too attached to their comfort item, or they absolutely refuse anything except for that one particular, and of course they get really after a while, that means yucky. I just made a face, sorry, and if you're listening you can't see it, but anyway, to recognize that for that particular child, their particular tool has to be this thing at this moment. It won't always be that way, but perhaps just helping ease the issue if they're not able to access that particular object on a particular day or in a particular moment, just recognizing that the distress level is going to be really, really high. And so perhaps the teacher or a little friend, because friends can be very empathetic, that can give that child some physical comfort in place of the child's desired object. And then I also wanted to bring up something that, just because I love to let people know what a real person I am, and I will share all of the mistakes I've made in my entire, well, we don't have time for that, but I do want to share with you something that you may, in terms of the individual variability, that you may also be wondering, okay, my child's not 2 anymore. They should be over this stage of needing a lovey or something. So these were my daughter's comfort items or emotional regulation tools since childhood, but she never let go of them. And as a parent, I'm watching her not be quite in the same developmental, in the same levels, perhaps, as her peers as she was growing up. And of course, that brought her and me, her mom, a lot of distress. And so at one point, I thought to myself, well, you know, if she weren't playing with these little toys so much now that she's a teenager, then perhaps she would socialize more with the other teens, even though I knew that she didn't have as much in common with the things that teenagers generally talk about, my daughter wasn't interested in. So, fortunately, there were wise people in Corinne's life that I said, well, let's go ask your therapist what she says. And she basically gave me a good stern talking to.
Well,
that I share this because I think this is something for you. If you have a child in your program and they're just a little different, little quirky, maybe not exactly where their peers are, they are where they are right then. And so here's what the therapist said. She said, she is using this as a tool to help herself regulate. It's a positive tool. She is not drinking or smoking or whatever, you know, that perhaps other teenagers might turn to as a tool. So why in the world would you take it away from her?
Absolutely.
So
I think that's a great
totally
place to.
chastised, I realized that that was what she needed.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, no, Kate, we're not ready to wrap up because that reminded me of another thing that some kids use as a self-soothing tool that it's very hard for the caregivers and the adults to take away, which are fingers or knuckles. And the number of times in my career I've heard somebody say, oh, that kid is too old to suck their fingers or too old to suck their thumb or whatever. And so, how do you get a kid to stop sucking their thumb? And I'm like, you make them feel more secure. You make them feel more comfortable, more safe, because they are sucking their thumb because they do not feel connected. They do not feel safe, and they feel like there is danger. So if the child is sucking their thumb a lot, you need to work more on connection. You don't need to dip their thumb in jalapeno juice. That is not okay.
No. And
You
especially
stole my-
because,
yeah.
I mean, I fall into that category, but my doctor told my mother, oh, instead of a pacifier, give her thumb. She won't lose it. And, so that came from the pediatrician in, 1969. So, but with that, I know we could even have another episode with Diane and Carrie on this conversation, but we are definitely maxed out on our time for today. And I'm so glad. I know, but I'm so glad that you guys joined us. And I know Carrie has something to say.
So if you learned something from this show, and I bet you did, share this show with somebody else who needs to know. Share it with the people who help design the policies at your school. Share it with the teachers who are constantly trying to take people's levies away. Share it with the parent who doesn't understand why their kid needs a blankie. Share this show with somebody else who needs to know. And go in and write a review on your podcast player of choice. We read every single one of those, and we will talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. We love bringing you real talk and fresh insight from the world of early childhood education. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all of the latest episodes. And if you're planning a conference, training, or special event, Kate and Carrie would love to speak to your audience. You can learn more about their keynote sessions and workshops at kateandcarrie.com. If you learned something today, share the show and leave us a review below. We'll see you next time on Child Care Conversations.